The left hook traveled exactly 18 inches through the Madison Square Garden air, cutting through space and time and the accumulated mythology of Muhammad Ali's invincibility with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel removing a tumor. In a fraction of a second, it took Joe Frazier's glove to cross the distance between his shoulder and Ali's jaw. Boxing history pivoted on its axis, sending the most famous athlete on earth crashing to the canvas for the first time in his professional career. Round 15 had been building toward this moment for 44 minutes of the most brutal boxing ever witnessed inside Madison Square Garden. Two undefeated heavyweight champions destroying each other with savagery that transcended sport and approached something closer to ritualized warfare. The temperature in the ring had climbed past bearable levels, transforming the elevated platform into a furnace, where two men were discovering the absolute limits of human endurance. Ali's feet had been moving with diminishing speed for the past 3 rounds, his legendary footwork reduced to a shuffle that still carried echoes of his former brilliance, but lacked the explosive grace that had made him untouchable for 7 years of professional boxing. Sweat poured from his body in streams that caught the television lights and created a geography of exhaustion across features that had become swollen beyond easy recognition. The crowd of 20,000 had been on their feet for the entire round, their collective voice creating a wall of sound that pressed against the ring from all directions, sensing that they were witnessing something historic, something that would be talked about for decades as the night when two champions fought with such intensity that one of them would have to die, metaphorically or literally, before the other could be declared victorious. Frazier moved forward with the relentless pressure of a man who had been absorbing punishment for 14 rounds and understood that his only path to victory lay through absolute commitment to violence, his bobbing head weaving through Ali's increasingly desperate attempts to maintain distance with jabs that lacked their former snap, their former ability to discourage aggressive opponents from pressing forward into danger. The Philadelphia fighter's left eye had been closed completely since the 8th round, transformed into a purple mass that reduces vision to a narrow slit of peripheral awareness. But his remaining eye burned with the kind of focused intensity that comes from understanding that greatness was within reach if he could sustain his assault for just 3 more minutes. Just 180 more seconds of the most punishing combat either man had ever experienced. Ali's face showed damage that no previous opponent had been able to inflict, his features distorted by swelling that made him look like a different person, like someone who had been in a car accident rather than a boxing match. His right eye was nearly closed, his lips split in multiple places, his cheekbones swollen to the point where they changed the entire geometry of his skull, creating a mass of violence that his own mother wouldn't have recognized. But beneath the physical damage, something more fundamental was being eroded. The psychological armor that had protected Ali through 7 years of professional boxing, the absolute conviction that he was too fast, too smart, too gifted to be seriously hurt by any heavyweight on earth. That armor was developing cracks that grew wider with each punch Frazier landed, each successful assault that penetrated defenses that had previously seemed impregnable. The fight of the century had been building toward this moment since the opening bell, when two undefeated champions had entered the ring, carrying not just their perfect records, but the weight of political symbolism that transformed their confrontation into something larger than sport. Ali represented anti-war sentiment, black Muslim ideology, and a counterculture that challenged traditional American values. Frazier represented blue-collar work ethic, patriotic loyalty, and the establishment's preferred version of what a champion should be. Madison Square Garden vibrated with energy that went beyond typical boxing excitement, the building itself seeming to understand that it was hosting an event that would define not just heavyweight boxing, but the cultural tensions of an entire era. Every seat was filled with celebrities, politicians, athletes, and ordinary fans who had paid unprecedented ticket prices for the opportunity to witness history being made in real time. Frank Sinatra worked as a photographer at ringside, his camera capturing moments that would become iconic representations of athletic warfare. Norman Mailer scribbled notes from his press seat, his novelists recognizing the literary dimensions of what was unfolding before him. Burt Lancaster provided commentary for closed-circuit television, his actor's training allowing him to appreciate the dramatic elements that elevated this beyond mere sport into the realm of classical tragedy. Frazier's left hook had been building power throughout the fight, each successful landing adding confidence to his certainty that he could penetrate Ali's defense with the weapon that had destroyed every previous opponent. His trainer Eddie Futch had identified the opening during their preparation, a split-second window when Ali's right hand dropped slightly after throwing his jab, creating a pathway for devastating counterattack. Round 15 began with both men understanding that they had perhaps 3 minutes left to settle a question that had been debated in barbershops, sports bars, and newspaper columns for 3 years. Who was a better fighter, the exiled former champion who claimed to be the greatest of all time, or the current title holder who had earned his position through grinding determination and devastating power rather than flashy charisma and psychological warfare? Ali's corner had sent him out for the final round with desperate instructions to stay away from Frazier's hook, to use his remaining speed advantage to circle and jab, to survive 15 minutes, and hope that his superior boxing skills would be enough to convince the judges that he had done enough to regain the championship that had been stripped from him 3 years earlier for refusing induction into military service. But survival required energy that Ali no longer possessed in sufficient quantities. Footwork that had been compromised by 14 rounds of the most punishing combat of his career, reflexes that had been slowed by accumulated damage that made it impossible to react with the lightning speed that had previously kept him safe from exactly this kind of devastating counterattack. 2 minutes into the 15th round, Ali committed a tactical error that would end his undefeated record and shatter the myth of his invincibility. He loaded up on a right hand that carried more ambition than accuracy, committing his weight forward in pursuit of a knockout punch that would settle the fight dramatically and restore him to undisputed championship status. The punch missed by 3 inches, but more importantly, it left him off balance for exactly 1 second, long enough for Frazier to recognize the opening, set his feet, and launch the left hook that had been building throughout their 44 minutes of warfare. The Philadelphia fighter's entire body weight transferred into the punch, his legs driving upward from the canvas, his torso rotating with mechanical precision, his left arm whipping through its arc with all the accumulated frustration of 14 rounds of punishment. The hook caught Ali on the right side of his jaw with perfect timing and placement, landing at the exact angle necessary to transfer maximum force directly to his brainstem, causing the kind of neurological disruption that instantly switches off consciousness like an electrical circuit breaker protecting a house from dangerous power surges. Ali's eyes rolled back immediately, showing only white for a fraction of a second before his entire muscular system simply stopped functioning. His legs, which had carried him through more than 200 amateur and professional fights without ever being seriously compromised, went completely limp, unable to support his 210 pounds of suddenly dead weight that began falling toward the canvas with the inevitability of gravity. His arms windmilled briefly as his unconscious body attempted some primitive defensive response, but the neurological damage was too complete for any coordinated movement. He fell backward, his head leading the way, his body following a perfectly straight line that spoke of complete muscular shutdown, complete systemic failure, complete vulnerability. The sound of Ali's body hitting the canvas echoed through Madison Square Garden like a gunshot, sharp and final, and somehow wrong in its suggestion that the invincible champion had been reduced to unconscious flesh and bone. 20,000 people heard that sound and understood immediately that they had witnessed something unprecedented, something that challenged their fundamental understanding of athletic invincibility. The crowd's reaction was instantaneous and complex. Cheers from Frazier supporters mixed with gasps of shock from Ali partisans, creating a cacophony of noise that reflected the political and cultural divisions that this fight had come to represent. Some spectators were on their feet celebrating. Others sat in stunned silence. Many covered their faces, as if they couldn't bear to witness the destruction of an icon. Referee Arthur Mercant began his count immediately, his voice cutting through the crowd noise with professional authority that had been trained to function in exactly these moments of extreme drama. 1, he shouted, his words marking the beginning of 10 seconds that would determine whether Ali's career would continue or effectively end with his first taste of real vulnerability. Ali lay motionless for the first 4 seconds of the count, his consciousness completely absent, his breathing shallow but steady, his body positioned exactly as it had fallen, arms spread wide, legs slightly bent, head tilted to one side in the universal posture of knockout unconsciousness that boxing fans recognized as the signature of devastating punch impact. 5. Mercant continued, his count echoing through the building's public address system and into the homes of millions watching on closed-circuit television, each number marking another second of proof that Muhammad Ali was human after all, that his claims of invincibility had been promotional fiction rather than literal truth. At the count of 6, Ali's eyes fluttered open, consciousness returning with the gradual awareness that comes after severe neurological disruption. His pupils struggled to focus, his brain attempting to process information that didn't make sense. Why was he looking up at bright lights instead of across at his opponent? Why could he hear the referee counting? Why was Madison Square Garden spinning like a carnival ride? 7. The count continued relentlessly, marking time in a moment that seemed to extend beyond normal duration, stretching into the kind of elastic temporality that occurs during life-changing events when seconds feel like minutes and single moments contain entire lifetimes of implication and consequence. Ali's body began responding to his brain's desperate commands to function, his arms pressing against the canvas in an attempt to push himself upright, his legs trying to remember how to support his weight, his consciousness gradually assembling itself in the scattered fragments that Frazier's hook had created in his neurological system. 8. Mercant's voice carried the weight of finality. The recognition that Ali had perhaps 2 seconds to demonstrate that he'd continue fighting, or his undefeated record would officially end. His claim to be the greatest would be forever compromised. His mystique of invincibility would be replaced by the reality of human vulnerability. With tremendous effort that drew upon reserves of will rather than physical capacity, Ali forced himself into a sitting position, then used the ropes to pull himself upright, his legs wobbling like a newborn animal taking its first steps. His eyes still unfocused, his equilibrium compromised by damage that would affect his balance for several more minutes. 9. The count reached its penultimate number as Ali stood swaying in the center of the ring, his gloves raised in front of his face more for psychological protection than technical defense. His brain still struggling to process the reality that he had been knocked down for the first time in his professional career, that the impossible had actually happened. 10 would have ended everything, would have given Frazier a knockout victory and consigned Ali to the historical category of former champions who have been exposed as mortal rather than mythical. But Mercant's assessment of Ali's condition led him to stop the count at 9, recognizing that the champion was conscious, vertical, and capable of defending himself, even if his defensive capabilities were severely compromised. The fight continued for another minute and 30 seconds, but the real story had been told in those 10 seconds when Muhammad Ali learned that he could be hurt, could be dropped, could be made vulnerable by an opponent who possessed the skill and determination to expose the gaps in a supposedly perfect defensive system. Frazier pressed forward immediately, recognizing that he had perhaps 90 seconds to capitalize on the most significant advantage he had gained in 15 rounds of warfare. His left hook became a guided missile, seeking the same target that had produced such devastating results, trying to land a follow-up shot that would complete the destruction that the first hook had begun. But Ali's defensive instincts, compromised though they were, remained functional enough to prevent another clean shot. He covered up, clinched when necessary, and somehow survived the remaining time in a round that had transformed him from invincible champion to vulnerable human being in the span of 18 inches and one perfectly timed left hook. The final bell rang with Ali still standing, but standing as a different fighter than the one who had entered the ring 45 minutes earlier. His undefeated record would survive this night, but his aura of invincibility would not. The knockdown had proven that Muhammad Ali could be hurt, could be dropped, could be made to look ordinary by an opponent with the right combination of skill, determination, and perfect timing. As Ali walked back to his corner, his movement carried none of the confident swagger that had characterized his ring walks for 7 years of professional boxing. Instead, he moved with the careful uncertainty of a man who had just discovered something unpleasant about the nature of combat, about the reality of physical vulnerability, about the gap between promotional claims and actual human limitations. The judges' scorecards would eventually award the fight to Frazier by unanimous decision, but the real verdict had been delivered by that left hook in the 15th round, the punch that proved Muhammad Ali was not, in fact, too fast to be caught, too smart to be fooled, too gifted to be hurt. He was simply a very good fighter who had been promoting himself as something more than human, until Joe Frazier's left hook provided a reality check that echoed through the boxing world for decades. Madison Square Garden slowly emptied after the decision was announced, 20,000 people filing out with the knowledge that they had witnessed something historic. Not just a great fight, but the moment when sport and mythology collided with physical reality and reality won. The unconscious Ali lying on a canvas would become one of boxing's most iconic images, proof that in the end, everyone falls. The left hook had traveled 18 inches and changed everything, transforming the greatest fighter of his generation from invincible champion to vulnerable human being in the time it takes to blink an eye. It was the punch that taught Muhammad Ali he could bleed, could fall, could lose. Lessons that would make him stronger in the long run, but hurt tremendously in that moment when his body hit the canvas and his perfect record absorbed its first crack. In that single second of impact, boxing learned that even the greatest could be brought low by an opponent with enough skill and determination to find the one perfect shot that exposes the humanity beneath the mythology. Joe Frazier's left hook didn't just knock down Muhammad Ali. It knocked down the entire concept of athletic invincibility, proving that in boxing, as in life, everyone eventually meets their match.